we can kill you, and we can kill you, which it instantly reports, report back to Sextus. Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Decryption and I hope you are well. In today's tutorial, I have a quest here that I can begin from this lord called Sextus, that when I query him, he says he's got a group of bandits that are terrorizing nearby villagers and he's offering a handsome reward for anybody who takes care. So I can run up, I can begin the quest, I can go to the bandit camp which is here, and it says I have to kill the 7 bandits. So I can come and take them out, which is all good, and then it tells me to return. However, one common question we have is how to dynamically change the quantity of items on narrative. My quest setup is pretty simple. I start the quest and I spawn the location node. I go to the location, I kill the enemy, and then I play the dialogue node. That's pretty it. But I might want the bandits to change how many there are depending on your level. So if you have an XP system and your level is say 50, you have a lot more enemies to spawn, or even different types of enemies. Whereas if your level is level 1, at the moment it's very static. So we need to look at a way to create a much better scaling system, which narrative can also use, and it's super simple to do. So what we're going to do is basically abstract this task part out of narrative into our own controllable blueprint. So I'm going to come into my blueprints, and inside my narrative folder, inside my quests and my blueprints, I'm just going to create a new blueprint here. It'll be a type of actor, and I'm going to call it dynamic enemy spawner. So now I'm going to add a bunch of variables that will help us control how the spawner works. The first thing I'm going to do is add a new locations variable of type vector, but I'm going to set it to an array. This will allow us to give us a bunch of different locations to spawn the enemies within. And inside the event graph, I'm going to come in and add a custom event called spawn enemies. In here, I'm going to drag a for each loop off, and I'm going to connect our locations to the array. So now we're going to loop through all the different locations we give. From the loop body, I'm going to come and create spawn actor from class. So from the class, I'm going to drag it off and I'm going to promote it to a variable so we can decide which type of NPCs we want to spawn. However, in my case, I'm going to change this to a type of my generic NPC style, but you can keep it as an actor. And I'm going to set it to a class reference, and I'm going to rename it NPC to spawn. I'll split the spawn transform, and I'll drag the location into the location. So now that we have our enemies spawning, we need a way to detect when they die so we can complete this task. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new variable here, and I'm going to call it enemy spawn, and it will be a type of integer. And what we will do originally when we're spawning these enemies is I will grab this enemy spawn and I will increment it. Increment basically means it's going to add 1 to it. So every time we spawn the enemies, we're going to add 1 to it, which is absolutely perfect, because now that we've done this, we can drag off from these enemies and we can add something called an event dispatcher to them. An event dispatcher is a way of attaching a function like a blueprint action here to another blueprint. So you can say on the NPC here, when they die, tell this other person. It's a messaging system. So on this enemy, currently on my basic NPC, they have some damage, and if their current health is low enough, they will die, and then it will destroy them. Pretty simple. So I'm going to create an event dispatcher here, and I'm going to call it ED has died, just like so. And it's super simple. All we're going to do is at the right point when we want to tell everything else this enemy has died, in my case, as soon as we check that the health is 0, I'm going to simply drag ED has died out, and I'm going to tap call, just like so. And all it's going to do is this ED has died will store many different functions we may want to add to it, and every time they die, it will simply tell every single one of them this NPC has died. So what we can do now on our dynamic spawner is grab this NPC, we can do an assign on ED has died. An assign will basically give us a function here saying when this ED has died is call this event here. So it's a nice little way to reroute the logic. So we're going to say come in, spawn the enemy for each location. When that enemy has died, call this function, and afterwards increase the enemies spawned here. Because we're not going to be calling has died straight away, it'll just come straight across and run this logic here. But in the background, this event will sit waiting for the enemy here to call has died. So in this has died event here, all I'm going to do is I'm going to come across and grab this enemy spawn integer again, and I'm going to de-increment it like so, which will take 1 off of it. And then from here, I can add a branch, and I can say, does this integer equal 0. If it equals 0, then we know the task is complete. So I can come from here and go get narrative component, which will grab the player controller or the pawn, which is my player, and try to get the narrative component from it. And from here, I can do complete narrative task. I can drag it to true. So this is a nice little way to take out the logic that we currently had in the narrative quest, but we're going to abstract it out so we have full control of it. In here, you might be thinking, what type of task are we going to do? And I'm going to instead, for my case, create a new task. So I'm going to come in here, narrative task, and I'm going to call it NT kill dynamic enemies. And I'm going to call it the dynamic name, like so. And then what we can do in is our dynamic spawner is set the task to be kill dynamic enemies, and the name will be the name of the group. So in my case, Roman bandits, and I can complete this off like so. I can now come back to the quest and I can delete this task off, and instead I can add our new task of kill dynamic enemies. The dynamic name will be Roman bandits, and the task description will be kill all the bandits. And the last thing I'm going to do is, once we complete the narrative task, we have no need for this spawner anymore. So I can simply come in and destroy the actor because we don't need it anymore. So now that we have this, all we need to do is somehow place this in the world and call spawn enemies while setting all the variables. Super easy. So I'm going to come into my narrative and my event, and I'm going to create a new event, type of narrative event, and I'm going to call this narrative event any spawn dynamic enemies. In here, I'm going to overwrite the execute event, and I'm going to simply come off and type spawn actor from class. The class will be our new BP dynamic enemy spawner, like so. The collision handling will be always spawn ignore collisions, and the spawns transform really doesn't matter. So I'm just going to split it and let it all default to 0. Then we can start setting the variables. So I'm going to drag off from here, and I'm going to set the NPC to spawn, and I'm going to drag it off from this variable, and I'm going to say promote it to a variable, because then we can control it from narrative. Tick the eyeball. The next time I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to set all of the locations, and just like before, I'm going to drag off from it and promote it to it so narrative can control it. And after we've finally done this and we've set the variables, I can drag off from this one more time and do spawn enemies to call the function. Another way you could do this is by setting input parameters for the spawn enemies function, but I've just decided to go this route. Both will work equally well. And I've just set up the return node to just say spawn dynamic enemies. So now we can come back to our quest, and depending where you want it to spawn, so I'm going to do it right at the beginning of the quest, I'm going to come in and I'm going to choose spawn dynamic enemies. And in here, you'll see we can choose an NPC to spawn. So I'm going to choose a Roman because that's mine. And then I'm also going to come down to locations, and we can set a bunch of locations completely dynamically. So I'm going to take the locations of all my 7 guards currently. There we go. So I've chosen 7 different locations to spawn. And now if we test it, we can come in, we can talk to Sextus, and we can ask him, do you have any services? He will say he's begin the quest, and we can come over and you can see 6 enemies have spawned. The quest of kill all bandits is here, so we can come in, we can kill you, 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 and we can kill you, which it instantly reports, report back to Sextus. Fantastic. Now when we complete it, we can come up, we have taken care of the bandits, and the game works absolutely perfectly fine. How cool is that, ladies and gentlemen? So you can continue to expand this like so, where you manually add them. For some aspects, this would work really well. What you can also do is add a boolean here to say dynamically spawn enemies or something like that, and in your spawner here you can grab the player's level or somehow however you want to spawn the enemies, and you can simply tell it spawn enemies, and you can randomize a location around that area. So there it is, ladies and gentlemen, a super easy way to dynamically spawn enemies in narrative, simply by creating a new task and taking away the spawning to our own custom spawner. Thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any other ideas for tutorials, please let me know, and I'll see you next time.